Hello and welcome to the FOXPEDITION podcast. Today we have a guest, Nathan, and we're kind of in the same industry, I would say. So Nathan would like to talk about the proactive approach of risk and security for international organizations or nationally working organizations. So Nathan, would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure, absolutely. I appreciate that. Appreciate you having me on board. Even though we work in some of the same space, we all kind of, some of the challenges are the same. So I think it's important as a community to come together and, as we work with clients and work with each other to learn from these, these challenges that we all have to overcome every day, honestly. So about myself, Nathan Ackerman, CEO of Riley Risk. So we are a risk advisory services firm. Our core clientele, I would say, for the most part, is humanitarian and international development type organizations working in what we call complex risk environments. Right. And that varies wildly, but usually it means higher risk, higher physical risk, not always. Sometimes it's the programming risk, but that's our core audience that we serve, honestly, in various locations in Ukraine and Haiti and Guatemala, all over the place.
Nice. Yeah, it's very interesting. So what do you mean when you say proactive approach? Or what's the opposite of proactive, maybe?
Right. Nah, proactive. So I would say the opposite of proactive would be reactive, right? To wait for something to happen and then to decide that, okay, well, we need to do something about it. And we all, those of us working in the security management field or even on the medicine side, which you guys are very strong in, you understand like there's some precautions and some things you should do ahead of time so you're better prepared. You wouldn't plan an expedition somewhere without the appropriate medical and safety devices to take with you, right? And it's a good case example. If you're doing a mountaineering expedition, if you don't bring what you need with you, you're going to have a really tough day. If you're halfway up that mountain, suddenly you realize you needed something and now you've got to wait to get that. Well, that intervention time might be too long. So that might be a severe loss of life or limb or what have you. So that's a really simple scenario explanation of why we think, being proactive about risk management is always going to set you up for success. So you're able to respond to things as they happen much more efficiently rather than have something happen and then try to figure out what you should do at that point, for sure.
Yeah. I really like the approach because I think a lot of people don't know how big the planning phase in security is. They always think security is just I say close protection. So you have a bodyguard walking beside you and this bodyguard will fight everyone who will come close to you. But I think it's highly underestimated how much planning you need to do for security. Because like you said, if you don't plan what equipment to bring and who will carry that equipment, then you don't have it. So I think that's very important. And do you see that there's a development in the security industry? So do you think there is more preparedness or more proactive approach, or are you like the first company who does it like this?
Yeah, no, we're definitely not the first company to take a proactive approach, for sure. I'd hope not, for the sake of the industry as a whole. I think our ability to communicate to our clients, about a proactive approach is something that needs to evolve. And some firms do it better. Some client organizations do it better than others. I would say organizations that take that proactive approach, we would call them mature, like they're security mature, risk aware cultures, right? Organizations. You had mentioned, the planning stage of everything, right? Sometimes we're a victim of our own success, right? I've worked in, post protection programs where it's like you run hundreds and hundreds of missions a month in a high risk environment and nothing happened. So people assume that things are going fine, but they have no idea like the amount of busy work that happens under the surface, like a duck on top of water, right? Just going away. So I think our ability to kind of educate to our clients, they're not going to get into it, as geeked out as we will because we're professionals. This is our profession. This is what we're doing. But we should let them know, like, if you're planning a trip going somewhere, there's a lot of pre-planning that goes into that if you wanted to have the outcome that you wanted to have, right? So I think it's on us to, kind of explain to them at a level that they can understand, like, you only benefit us when you involve us earlier in the planning process rather than let us react to it when something happens.
Yeah. What would you say where's like the most planning you need to do? Because you mentioned Guatemala, for example, you mentioned high risk areas, NGOs work in. Would you say that there is much more planning to do, or is it like the same as if someone goes on a hike or mountaineering? Is it like the same level of planning, or do you need, one more planning than the other?
I guess, the response to that would be, it depends, right? Certainly there's plenty of, there's a meme going around on social media of like someone on a hiking trail and they've got like their Garmin, their bag,
Yeah.
their rest, their tent and everything like that. And there's like a 60-year-old girl carrying her doll with her and she's doing the same hiking trail. Of course, like, the same people on the same trail, obviously the preparation that the 6-year-old young lady on her expedition is exactly the same planning process. We're not talking about that though. Nothing's probably going to happen on a short walk around the park. But if you're talking about like something that's a little bit more extensive where you're doing some serious mountaineering or you're doing a journey management plan in a high risk environment, where maybe the profile of the individuals does not match the environment, right? Or maybe they don't speak the language, they've never been there before. There's limited medical assets. Communications is not solid. There's a lot of factors that go into this. So it really honestly depends like how much planning is needed ahead of time. And I think rather than focusing on like, well, how much planning do we need? I think the conversation, regardless of who you're working with, should be like, just tell your security providers, tell your security team, whoever they are, organic or whatever, let them know in advance, like, hey, we're thinking about doing this. The sooner you let them, they can let you know how much planning you probably are going to need to get that accomplished, right? So then you're both set up for success. It just does everyone a favor.
Yeah, I think that's a good point because sometimes you probably have the same. Sometimes we are approached and someone says, hey, I need this person there in like 1.5 hours.
Yes,
And sometimes it's just not possible. Especially if we talk about disaster management or NGOs, because NGOs have to respond fast, like within 24 hours or even less. So how do you do this? Can you have a proactive approach on these scenarios, or is it just reactive?
Yeah, well, certainly the standard, right, would be to be proactive as much as possible, but that's not the reality. Sometimes you just find yourself in a situation where resources are limited or a disaster, something that's unforeseen happened. You're just not prepared for this, event. But you can still equip yourself and your organization that you're working with in a much better fashion by doing what we call capacity building, right? There's a lot of planning. There's a lot of things that they can take upon themselves to be aware of, right? So we'll take doing a journey management plan as an example, right? Like we've got some clients with portfolios, let's say they're in 50, 60 different countries. We're not doing a journey management plan for every single domestic travel in each one of those countries. That's impossible. There's a lot that they can do themselves because we can teach them and show them, hey, if you're traveling to the northern part of Nigeria, this is what you should consider. This is your resources. This is your form that you would fill out. The approval process, that's what it looks like. Do you have a Garmin with you, a sat phone? Are you bringing medical equipment with you? So there's a lot of things that don't necessarily need to involve a security professional that you can take upon yourself. Obviously, for the heavy lifting, they'll reach out to us and we'll engage with them and support them as needed, or we'll deploy someone. There's a lot of kind of like factors that we go into that. But there's a lot that they can do upon themselves and take upon themselves, certainly, to have the basics. We call it, my old company commander in the Marine Corps, we call it brilliance in the basics. I think every company commander in the Marine Corps, probably every military says brilliance in the basics, right? You cannot be, advanced until you do the fundamentals really, really well. And that's the same in anything you try to do.
Definitely. Can you maybe give some insights if we stay in the context of NGO workers, like some examples what they can do for themselves, but doesn't need a security professional?
Well, there's quite a bit, honestly. The journey management planning aspect, that's certainly one thing they can do. Once you've done like a good journey management plan, it's not really advanced. It's just asking questions. Where are you going? Point A to point Z, how many points are in between? Like, do you have medical resources? What hotels are you staying at? Okay, those hotels. Who vetted those hotels? Are they safe hotels? Who said they're safe hotels, right? Communications, the vehicles. I mean, it doesn't matter where you work in the world. RTAs, road traffic accidents, still lead the indicator on things that go bad during trips, right? So is the vehicle safe? Is the driver a safe driver? What have you? So journey management planning, absolutely something that an organization can be equipped to handle with enough training, for sure, on their own organically. The other part of that is venue selection, site security assessments. Now, of course, we wouldn't ask a non-security professional to do a full-on comprehensive site security assessment of a hotel or some other venue. but there's still a lot of basic, once again, fundamentals that they can still apply. Is this in a safe location? Is there access control measures in place? Has there been any attacks or anything like that noted within the last, say 24 months or even longer against this hotel?
Mm-hmm.
Who else is staying at this hotel, right? I mean, if you're working and traveling in Ukraine, you probably don't want to stay in a hotel that has military staff staying there because it's probably going to be targeted, right? So common sense kind of applies for that. But that same kind of a planning process can be applied in any country. Yeah, so that's both of those examples I think kind of apply. Certainly, you can kind of evolve from that and build on that. So eventually, I think ideally, the organizations that are security, conscious and mature, they've got the ability to take a lot of these responsibilities on for themselves and reach out to their security teams or departments or their head of programs for like more of the complicated aspects that they might need support with, like choosing a security vendor or setting up a contract with a security vendor, or maybe like a high risk travel movement in a higher risk zone where you need those kind of additional expertise and resources. But for more of the business as usual type of operational aspects, there's a lot that you can certainly do to kind of set a good foundation for that.
Yeah, no, I really like the idea to equip them with certain informations, because you said it's common sense. And yeah, I think it's common sense for like if you work in security industry, but it might not be common sense to, I would say, normal people. So yeah, I really like the idea to set up, I would say a standard for common sense, because we think it is, but might not be for everyone. So I think it's really good to talk this personnel through. And like you're saying, especially this travel planning. Of course, it's somehow a little bit security, but on the other hand, it's more like basic travel management, what every organization should do for themselves if they send out people. So I think that's a very, very good idea. So what does your security company go beyond this? Because if they can do this for themselves, so what can you put on top to make them even more secure?
Yeah, well, there's a lot, in terms of the capacity building, we do a lot of training with our clients and our organizations, helping them kind of equip, because I mean, you get into, security departments nowadays. I mean, I was talking to an organization that's massive, they're I think in almost every single country in the world. This is in I saw in Warsaw, Poland, and their security team's like 12 people. And so it's like the amount of like, of course that there's always something to do. So they rely on vendors for specific purposes and needs in specific countries or roles, right? But they've kind of learned to evolve their organization to manage that. If you work in in the United States in Silicon Valley, the technology aspect of that field, right? I mean, you've seen like entire security departments just let go, right? Your economy's in a downturn, and now we ask security departments to do more and more and more, while not really kind of thinking about like, well, what exactly are we asking them to do, and what do we maybe not need to bother them to do? So there's a lot that goes into that, prioritizing what tasks we're going to ask security departments to do, but there's a lot that it certainly can be self-sufficient for these organizations. So the training aspect is absolutely critical. I think training should be continuous. It should be also relevant, right? I mean, it's very difficult to train someone if they understand that this is the same content that was taught over and over again, or maybe it doesn't even matter to like the country I'm working. You just lose the audience. It's difficult to train that type of environment. So try to make it fit the context. If there's one word I use too much, it's context. Like make it fit the box that you're in currently in that moment. Understands like these are the resources. We understand that. We understand your limitations. We also understand your capabilities, right? So let's while being aware of your limitations, let's focus on expanding your capabilities and work from there. The the training of security teams, we do a lot of training for junior and advanced security teams as well. Kind of the information and the informing ability. We do a lot of geopolitical and security analysis for some of these locations that we work in, and we do that through like pulling. Everyone, open source information is everywhere, right? The world is awash of all this noise. So we've got the ability to take that information, to distill it, to make it fit the context, to use our security operations team to make it match what this client might care about, because we might have multiple clients in one country and maybe one client only cares about like what's happening for one topic. no one else cares about it, right? Because maybe they're not working in that field or that area or whatever the case might be. So the kind of the protection of what we do through security management expertise, and then the geopolitical and security analysis support. And that's something that I think operational insights, intelligence that really helps inform day-to-day operations is super super useful. And if you have a really good daily kind of an awareness, like this is what's happening, you can minimize a lot of your security budget just because you're able to modify what you're planning based off of that information, right? If it's relevant and contextual for the environment, for sure.
Yeah, it's very good that you talk about OSINT as well, because I feel like there's a lot of information out there which is, for example, not legit or suits a certain political agenda, especially if we talk about the Middle East and you don't even have to go to hostile environments. I recently saw about posts about Dubai, and people are claiming, oh, they don't have human rights, they don't have women rights. And I thought, like, we're talking about Dubai, it's like New York City. So where's this information coming from? And so I would like to ask you, where does this source of information, or which source of information do you use, and how does maybe also normal daily life people know what information is legit and what not? How can they fact check it, for example?
Yeah, no, yeah, the world is full of information, right? It's not all correct information, right?
Yes.
Or maybe it's outdated, or like you said, it has a political slant, or someone had a bad experience somewhere and they just they hold on to that and repeat it, and over time it becomes a noise and a root. So I think, like any other organization, you've got to have the ability to filter all that noise out and to eliminate what is misinformation, categorically not true, what is maybe not true for the context, what's not true for that scenario anymore, or whatever the case might be. And then, to underpin that honestly with if you've got the ability to do this, to have on the ground resources, right?
Yes.
If you have local intelligence and ground truth, people who are living there, who understand the environment and the cultural awareness of what this means, whatever the topic is, you're going to set yourself up for success far much more than if you're just, listening to the noise, for sure.
Yeah, no, definitely. Yeah, because it's also funny, if we've been to Saudi Arabia, and if you compare what Germans know about Saudi Arabia and what Saudi Arabians know about Germany, like you're saying, the noise, there was a TikTok video in Saudi Arabia that Germany is changing their flag that looks a little bit like the Saudi Arabian flag, and that we have a Muslim president soon and stuff like that, where I was like, that's not true at all. That's completely fake. And same with information we had in Germany about Saudi Arabia, where I was saying, okay, this obviously is not true because we're here and we saw it with our own eyes. So I think it's really good to work with local source, but yeah, of course it's very, very hard to get it, because you need to go there. You need to also see that this source is legit and not with a political agenda. So I think that's still the best way to do it, not just having open source intelligence, but also have people on the ground that you can pick up the phone and talk to.
Yeah, there's 2 points to that too about the information. One of those is I'd like to make is one is artificial intelligence, and when it's misinformation campaigns. I mean, it's incredible now within the last just year and a half. The ability for AI to manufacture voices and videos, and so it just helps those that are for spreading it for misinformation, because you can take someone who's perhaps known or trusted or just a brand. You can just pump that information out into the space, and certainly people will believe it, right? And so that's something, a whole other layer that you have to kind of wade through to get to the ground truth and that ground information that's actually authentic. The other part is kind of that awareness, ground truth, and people that are there on the ground, their local insights and their cultural awareness, because cultural considerations will certainly have an impact on intelligence. Absolutely. You have to factor in what that really means for whatever you're trying to solve, whatever the problem is or the challenge is, because their context might be a bit swayed by the local context of it all, right? So case in point, where you might be one country where people might run from a rain coming in, like a storm, but if there's a shooting or something like that, they won't even move, right? So they just became so fatigued because this is their environment. For them, that's just something else that's just happened, right? But obviously, as a security professional, you have to understand kind of that awareness, okay, well, if the ground truth is saying like this is not an issue, what makes them say that exactly? Because
true.
maybe they've just this is not an issue because they live in it every single day, maybe for years. So they're completely fatigued. So you also have to weigh that into it as well, because the last thing you want to do is to just take that at gospel basically, and then go there and understand that this is much worse than I had anticipated, because you're coming from an outside environment into that inside operational environment where you're trying to work or travel or do something, right? So for sure.
Yeah, no, it's definitely good to ask the questions, like when you ask, is it safe? And they say yes, and you ask why.
Yeah.
So
Why do you think it's safe, right?
yeah, we also sometimes have it the other way around when we ask, is it safe for us to drive a car here in the country? And they say, oh no, don't do that. But they don't know that we have like off-road experience, that we drove through the desert and stuff like that. So tiny potholes are not like a major problem for us. And even though the people know how the highway looks in Germany, and they think, oh, our roads are not as good. So they say, I would not recommend driving here. But yeah, for us, it might not be a problem. So maybe it's also, that you need to ask, like, why do you think it is a problem? Or the other way around, why do you think it's safe? So I think that's a good approach. You also talked a little bit about AI, and that AI can be used from the enemy, of course, to fake voices, to fake footage, etc. Do you also think that security professionals can use it? Because I've heard of a system that you can check criminal data, for example, and collect it, and then you can say where the next crimes will happen in the future. But I don't think it's used by police right now. But maybe your thoughts.
I think we've all seen that movie before. Tom Cruise is in it, right? So precognitive. But yeah, I mean that's certainly, the artificial intelligence it's just a tool. It can be used by criminals or state actors or what have you, or it can be used for something of benefit to society, right? And certainly, for a risk management company or a security company, the more they have the ability to kind of leverage AI for the benefit to be able to do tasks that we wouldn't normally, you don't need like human involvement for every single step. If you wanted to do data analysis, or you wanted to do, help draft policy and procedures at a very large document that's, needed by a donor organization, certainly you're going to be better off using AI to help you craft something in a logical fashion. But you still need to not trust the AI, to the point where it's doing the work for you, because it will not. It's still going to hallucinate. It's going to make mistakes. And if you just let the machines run itself, eventually you're going to end up with something that's not usable at all, or might even cause harm to the client or your organization, right? So you've got to have those checks and balances in place. Use it just like any other tool, right? You have to sharpen. You've got a hammer in the toolbox. You're not going to use it for everything. It doesn't work for everything. But you know how to use it though, for sure, because it's gonna benefit you. It's just one more tool in the toolbox. Yeah,
no, I think that's true. If you have a lot of data, I think that's a good thing which AI can do. That you say, please analyze this data. So I think it's really good for these purposes. But yeah, I tried to do it because I was just curious what AI can't and what it can do. So I said, write a security concept for, I don't know, Colombia, for example, for this specific area. And no chance. It was, still wrote something, but it was complete BS. So I think that's also maybe a bit dangerous for people who don't come with a security background, that they say, hey, write something about the security in wherever they want to go, and then AI does something, and they're like, hey, cool, I did something, So
well, that's the drawback of it all. Someone, well, I don't need to. Why would I need a security company or any help with this at all? I'll just go to ChatGPT and say I'm going to this country. Give me a good travel plan. And of course, if you're not a security professional, you're not going to spot that's
exactly.
The information's outdated. You're missing at least 5 or 6 priority risks that are consistent there. But you're going to feel pretty good, until you find yourself in a situation that, the AI didn't think of, right? Because it's just a machine. It's only going to take the information it has available and spit it back out in whatever fashion that you give it. So yeah, you certainly still need the human intervention to manage it, for oversight, for sure.
Definitely. Because you said you're also teaching like NGO stuff, for example. How, or do you think it is teachable, like situational awareness? Can you teach it? Because I sometimes have security seminars where I try to teach people situational awareness, but I find it really hard because some people just have a really good intuition and gut feeling, and some people just don't have it at all.
Yeah.
I personally sometimes feel it's very, very difficult to teach situational awareness in a course, for example, if you're not in that specific environment. So what do you think? Is it teachable or is it something which comes from within?
Yeah, well, no, that's good. That's excellent feedback, and I would agree for sure. It's difficult to teach situational awareness. Probably it's going to need someone a lot smarter than me to tell the crowd, is situational awareness like a genetic trait, or is it just something that you learn maybe early on in life and you kind of grow from there? I don't know. I'll find out maybe after this call. Yeah, no, that's something that I think is important though, and I think there's certainly some concepts, the foundational basics of having situational awareness that are useful. We do a lot of travel briefings, like we do very comprehensive travel briefings where people go into these high risk environments. And we've always gotten a lot of good feedback on those travel briefings because, what is a travel briefing? It's honestly just training, right? It's training for travel to this specific country, right? And we always touch on situational awareness in those training, these travel briefings. We've certainly gotten some feedback over time. It's like, I wouldn't have thought to look for this, except for it was mentioned in the briefing. So like now I look for it. So I think as professionals, like we, certainly for those who have also had additional training on security awareness, and situational awareness, and understand things like, risk profile and like, what's the normal baseline for the environment when you go to a new neighborhood in a new country? We all know these things because, probably we've been taught those things, right? So we have that understanding. So I think our expectations for understanding, like, how advanced is someone going to be in situational awareness after like a 2-hour course probably need to be minimized a little bit, because probably they're going to pick up some things that are going to be useful for them that they may never would have gotten before. And I think at least that's a benefit, right? So that's, we've at least done something for them that they probably never would have gotten before. So I think we made some progress. There will still be those who are like, whether it's organically or whatever their makeup is from their background or past experiences, they take to it much more quickly, right? Just like any other. I think it's a skill, honestly. So like people have the ability to learn this much more faster. And then we can see that, we can identify that. We're like, wow, that was really good training, right? So, but I think it's the thing that we should always do. We should all strive for situational awareness. I mean, name an environment where having increased situational awareness would not benefit you, anywhere. I mean, if you're in Washington, D.C., walking down the street, at 9 o'clock at night, you could do with some situational awareness. It doesn't have to be to like a high risk environment like Ukraine. So I think it's a useful life skill, honestly. It's very interesting you bring this up because we're working on a specific course that's for international development organizations for, like, we call it enhanced situational awareness. And that's for what we call working in closed space environments where, like, maybe the government is authoritative, right? So like if you're going to be working there as an aid worker, you might have surveillance, or maybe the government doesn't want you there. So like this is a much different space for you to work in. So we're working on a course for that. But yeah, I think it's useful. It's a life skill. And if it helps everyone's safety, we should, if you got an opportunity to take situational awareness training in any venue, I think you should take it.
Yeah, no, definitely. I think some people sometimes like laugh about it and say, that's a soft skill and stuff like that, and how to teach it. But yeah, I totally agree with you that it's a skill you can learn to a certain degree. And yeah, like you're saying, you can learn it basically everywhere. I think you just need to look out that you don't get paranoid. If you like walk the streets the whole time, just looking over your shoulder, that's also not normal. But just sitting in a cafe and looking at people and saying, who's strange and why is this person maybe strange? I think that's a good way to train it wherever you are, also in like your home environment. Yeah, and I think it's very useful to train it and also to have courses on that. Because, of course, it's a soft skill. It's not like you're saying, hey, you hit a target within, 10 centimeter distance or something. But you should do training, especially if we go to this environment that you mentioned, like maybe hostile environments or even like Guatemala environments, which are not like 100% safe. or also just
Yeah.
like strange environment, I would say, where maybe people don't look like we look, so people will look at you and you might feel
Sure.
not very comfortable. And for that, I think it's very useful.
Yeah, I think, I mean, if you talk about situational awareness, like it's the intent or the outcome of what that skill should bring is honestly just risk avoidance, right? So if you can
Yes.
spot something that's a
Yeah.
problem or a threat or what have you, then probably you're going to be better equipped to avoid that threat rather than stumble upon it because you just didn't see it, right? So in that aspect, I think just having foundational skills in that. And certainly you don't want to have like anxiousness, like you don't want to like have people operating in the red all the time, like assuming something's gonna come up and get them. But you can certainly increase that level of awareness for sure.
Definitely. So, yeah, what would you say? Do you have like a closing statement or a final summary of what we talk about? Like, how can we be proactive in our risk management?
Yeah, no, I think closing statement. Yeah, I think obviously the whole proactive approach rather than reactive approach, we understand that like that's probably what is best for everyone, for your organization. And certainly if you're a security company or a risk advisory company, like it makes your job easier. If you know something's happening rather than like, oh, by the way, we have someone in Nepal and they need an oxygen tank on the side of a mountain. We need it 2 hours ago. Like, obviously your day is going to be a lot better, right? As well as the traveler. So that proactive approach is going to be the best approach. And honestly, if you think about it, over the long term, if you look at proactive approach rather than reactive approach from a security budget standpoint, you're going to have much more of a consistency over time, right? Because an organization that's able to manage the daily business as usual operational challenges is going to be much better equipped. But if you have reactive approach, like every time we have a problem and we're not equipped to handle this, we have never been trained, we don't have any capacity building, you're going to have spikes all over the place.
True.
Funding expenses here, no resources here. So it makes sense for a lot of reasons. But honestly, essentially, it's really about communication. If you tell like your security department, your team, whoever you're working with, as long as you keep them informed, they're going to keep you informed and let you know what they need from you to help you be safer. So that's always going to be the goal. That's going to be the best way forward. Whether you're a CPO, with an executive, or if you're managing like an NGO group somewhere in Ukraine, for sure.
Okay. Then thank you very much. I will link your website in the show notes. So everyone who wants to contact you and wants to know more about your work, what you are doing, I will link it in the show notes. Yeah, your website, your LinkedIn. And yeah, thank you very much for being here and being on the podcast. And yeah, I hope we stay in contact.
Okay. Thanks a lot, Inga. Talk to you later.
Thank you.
Bye now.
Bye-bye.